The first rays of dawn kissed the village, but John Smythe, the blacksmith, was already hard at work. His day began before most, ensuring the village had the tools it needed. The rhythmic clang of hammer on steel was a constant song in the life of the village. The heart of John's workshop was the forge, its fiery breath the lifeblood of his craft. He fed it with coal and wood, coaxing the iron to a molten glow, ready to be shaped to his will. The heat was intense, but John was used to it. With practiced ease, John used tongs to retrieve a glowing piece of iron from the heart of the fire. Sparks flew as he moved it to the anvil, ready to begin the careful work of shaping it. The rhythmic clang of the hammer against the anvil filled the air as John began to shape the heated iron. Each strike was deliberate, guided by years of experience and an innate understanding of the metal's properties. Thomas Baker approached the blacksmith's shop, the broken plow part heavy in his hands. The success of his harvest depended on John's skill in repairing the vital tool. Time was of the essence. The planting season waited for no man. "Morning, John," Thomas greeted. "Plow's given way. Need it mended sharpish if I'm to get the sowing done." John took the broken piece, his experienced eyes assessing the damage with a practiced gaze. John nodded, setting to work immediately. The rhythmic clang of his hammer filled the air once more as he skillfully reshaped and reinforced the broken metal. He knew the village depended on his work. He plunged the heated metal into the water trough, a hiss of steam rising as the iron cooled and hardened. Quenching the metal was a crucial step, tempering it for the rigors of the field. Thomas watched anxiously, knowing that every hour lost to the broken plow was an hour lost to the vital planting season. The uncertainty of the harvest weighed heavily on his mind. "There you go, Thomas," John said, handing back the repaired part. "Good as new. Best get to those fields before the weather turns." Thomas thanked him, relieved to have the plow ready once more. As Thomas departed, John gazed into the flames of his forge, a thoughtful expression on his face. He'd heard whispers of new ways, of mass-produced goods from distant lands. He wondered if his craft, so vital to the village, would endure the changing times. But for now, the village needed him. John picked up his hammer, the familiar weight comforting in his hand, and continued his work. The rhythmic clang echoed through the village, a testament to the enduring importance of the blacksmith's trade. The sun, barely peeking over the thatched roofs, found Elizabeth Carter already at her loom. As a seamstress, her days were dictated not by the seasons of the field, but by the needs of the village. Each stitch she made was a step towards economic independence, a rare path for an unmarried woman in this era. Linen, woven from flax grown in nearby fields, was her staple. She could tell its quality by touch, discerning the strength of the fibers and the tightness of the weave. Wool, too, found its way into her hands, spun and dyed in vibrant hues for those who could afford it. These materials were the foundation of her livelihood. Elizabeth's skill lay not only in her stitching, but in her pattern making. Each garment was carefully planned, using parchment patterns she meticulously crafted, ensuring the best use of cloth and a flattering fit for her clients. Her nimble fingers danced across the fabric, guided by years of experience. Each stitch was precise, each seam strong. She mended tears, fashioned new clothes, and altered garments to fit growing children or changing figures. Her shop was a hub of village commerce. Farmers bartered grain for sturdy work shirts, while wealthier families commissioned fine gowns and elaborate headdresses. Elizabeth's skills sustained her and contributed to the village's economy. As an unmarried woman, Elizabeth occupied a precarious position. Some admired her independence, while others whispered about her unconventional life. Yet she persevered, determined to carve her own path despite societal expectations. Margaret Baker, wife of Thomas, approached Elizabeth's shop with a mix of anticipation and concern. A new dress was a rare luxury, but she hoped to commission one for the upcoming harvest festival. "Good day, Margaret," Elizabeth said, her voice welcoming. "What brings you to my humble shop today?" "The harvest festival is fast approaching, Elizabeth," Margaret replied. "I was hoping you could create a new dress for me, something special." Elizabeth laid out samples of wool and linen, dyed in various shades. Margaret hesitated, her fingers tracing the patterns. Cost was a major factor, but she also wanted something that would reflect the joy of the harvest. As Margaret described her vision, Elizabeth sketched, her pencil capturing the essence of her desires. A simple design, yet elegant, suitable for a farmer's wife, but with a touch of festive flair. With the design agreed upon and a portion of the payment exchanged, Margaret left the shop, her heart lighter. The prospect of a new dress, crafted by Elizabeth's skilled hands, brought a touch of joy to the hard realities of her life. For Elizabeth, it was another commission, another step towards securing her place in the village and proving that a woman could thrive on her own merits. The bells of the small village church echoed through the fields, calling the people to worship. Sunday was a day of rest, dictated both by God and by custom, offering a brief respite from the relentless demands of agricultural life. It was a day for community, for shared faith, and for seeking solace in the familiar words of the Scripture. Thomas and Margaret Baker walked to church with their children, the weight of the week's labors still clinging to their shoulders. The service offered a chance to pray for a bountiful harvest, for the health of their family, and for deliverance from the hardships that plagued their lives. Their simple clothes, though worn, were their best, reserved for this weekly act of devotion. Even John Smythe, the blacksmith, whose hands were more accustomed to hammer and anvil than prayer book, found solace in the familiar rhythm of the service. The smithy stood silent on the Sabbath, its fiery heart extinguished, replaced by the cool serenity of the church. Elizabeth Carter, the seamstress, knelt in quiet contemplation. Unmarried and independent, she sought strength in her faith, praying for guidance and protection in a world that offered few certainties to a woman alone. Father Michael's sermon touched upon the importance of charity and forgiveness. He navigated the delicate balance of upholding tradition while acknowledging the changing religious landscape of England, urging his parishioners to remain steadfast in their faith, but respectful of differing beliefs. After the service, Margaret Baker approached Father Michael, her brow furrowed with worry. She confessed her anxieties about the failing crops and the health of her youngest child, seeking his counsel and blessing. Later that afternoon, Father Michael visited John Smythe at his home. The blacksmith, a pillar of the community, confided in the priest his concerns about the changing times and the potential impact on his livelihood. The priest listened patiently, offering words of encouragement and reminding him of the enduring value of his craft. As the sun began to set, the village square transformed into a scene of celebration. A local festival, a tradition passed down through generations, brought the community together. There was music, dancing, and shared food, a testament to the enduring bonds that held them together. Even Thomas and Margaret Baker allowed themselves a moment of respite, joining in the dancing and laughter. For a brief time, the worries of the farm faded into the background, replaced by the simple joy of community. Elizabeth Carter, watching the children at play, felt a sense of belonging. Though her path was different from many, she found contentment in her independence and the support of her fellow villagers. As the evening drew on, John Smythe sat by the fire with other elders, sharing stories of the past. Their laughter echoed through the night, a reminder of the shared history and enduring spirit of the village. Father Michael watched over his flock, a silent guardian ensuring their well-being. The flickering candlelight illuminated the faces of his parishioners, a testament to their faith, their resilience, and the enduring strength of their community. Summer's bounty was upon them. The wheat stood tall and golden, ready for harvest. Thomas knew the next few weeks would be a relentless cycle of labor, but the promise of a full granary spurred him on. Margaret worked alongside Thomas, her sickle flashing in the sun. Every movement was practiced, efficient. The success of the harvest depended on their combined effort and the help of their neighbors. The community worked together during the harvest. Neighbors helped neighbors, sharing the burden and the reward. The fields buzzed with activity as families labored side by side. John Smythe, the blacksmith, kept busy sharpening sickles and repairing tools. A dull blade could mean lost time and wasted grain, a luxury no one could afford. But amidst the bounty, a shadow of fear loomed. The summer heat bred disease, not just in humans but in the crops themselves. Margaret worried about the blight that had struck the neighboring village's wheat. Father Michael moved among his flock, offering what comfort he could. A fever had swept through the village, leaving many weak and bedridden. He knew prayer was often the only solace he could provide. Elizabeth, despite her skill with a needle, felt helpless against the invisible enemy. News of the sickness traveled quickly, and a sense of unease settled over the village. Margaret brewed herbal remedies, drawing on the knowledge passed down through generations of women. A concoction of willow bark for fever and honey with thyme for coughs, these were their weapons against illness. Thomas walked through his fields, his heart heavy. He scrutinized each stalk of wheat, searching for the telltale signs of blight. The threat to their livelihood was ever present. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the village, John Smythe felt the weight of the years. He'd seen many summers come and go, each with its own trials. Survival was a constant struggle, a delicate balance between hope and despair. In the dim light of the church, Father Michael led the evening prayers. The villagers, their faces etched with worry, sought solace in their faith, praying for health, for a good harvest, and for strength to endure whatever lay ahead. In the quiet of their small cottage, Thomas and Margaret clung to each other, finding comfort in their shared love and resilience. The summer's bounty was a blessing, but summer's threat was a constant companion. The harvest was in, but Thomas knew the true reckoning was yet to come. The Lord's due, a fixed portion of his crops and livestock, owed to the manor for the privilege of working the land. This year, the yield barely covered his family's needs, let alone the Lord's demands. Margaret tallied their meager savings. Each penny represented hours of backbreaking labor, bartered goods, and careful economies. It was never enough. The Lord's due was a constant burden, a drain on their already strained resources. Thomas sought John's counsel. The blacksmith, though not a farmer, understood the weight of obligation. The manor loomed in the distance, a symbol of power and wealth, a stark contrast to their own humble lives. "Times are hard, Thomas," John rasped, wiping sweat from his brow. "The Lord cares little for our struggles. He demands his due, regardless of the harvest. Many are whispering about it, the injustice of it all." The manor stood in stark contrast to the humble village. Its stone walls, Tall chimneys and manicured gardens spoke of wealth and privilege. It was a world apart, sustained by the labor of those who toiled in the fields. Within the manor walls, life was a tapestry of feasts and leisure. The lord and his family lived in comfort, seemingly oblivious to the hardships endured by those who provided their sustenance. The day arrived when Thomas had to pay his due. With a heavy heart, he led one of his precious cows towards the manor gates. It was a sacrifice that would leave his family with less milk and cheese throughout the winter. Margaret watched him go, her heart aching with a sense of injustice. She understood the necessity of the Lord's due, but the disparity between their lives and the Lord's felt increasingly unbearable. Father Michael witnessed the scene. He knew the economic realities of their world, but he also sensed the growing resentment among the villagers. It was a dangerous undercurrent that threatened the fragile peace of their community. Elizabeth, ever independent, focused on her work. She understood the hardships of village life, the burdens of the Lord's due. She was determined to create a secure future for herself, independent of the whims of lords and landowners. As dusk settled over the village, hushed conversations filled the air. The Lord's due had become a symbol of their economic plight, a constant reminder of the inequality that defined their lives. The seeds of discontent were sown. Back in their humble cottage, Thomas and Margaret found solace in each other's presence. They knew the challenges ahead would be great, but their bond, and the bonds of their community, would be their strength in the face of adversity. The flickering candle in their window symbolized hope, however faint, in a world of hardship and uncertainty. The air crackled with anticipation. Today was a day of joy, a wedding day. The whole village buzzed with excitement, a welcome distraction from the usual hardships of their lives. Colorful ribbons adorned the church, and the scent of wildflowers filled the air, a rare luxury. Margaret straightened her apron, a nervous flutter in her stomach. Weddings were a reminder of life's cycle, of hope and new beginnings. She thought of her own wedding day, so many years ago, and the joys and trials she and Thomas had shared. Thomas stood beside Margaret, his calloused hand finding hers. He wasn't one for grand displays of emotion, but the sight of the happy couple brought a quiet satisfaction to his heart. A wedding meant prosperity, a continuation of their community. Elizabeth watched the bride and groom approach, a mix of emotions swirling within her. While she appreciated the beauty and tradition of the ceremony, she couldn't help but feel a pang of loneliness. As an unmarried woman, her future felt uncertain, her path less clearly defined. In his workshop, John Smythe carefully polished the simple iron rings he had forged for the couple. Each ring was a testament to his craft, a symbol of the enduring strength of the village and the bonds that held them together. He hoped they would bring the young couple as much happiness as his own marriage had brought him. Father Michael stood at the altar, his heart filled with hope. He saw in the young couple the promise of a future, a continuation of the faith and traditions that had sustained the village for generations. He prayed that their union would be blessed with love, strength, and resilience in the face of whatever challenges lay ahead. The ceremony began, Father Michael's voice resonating through the small church. He spoke of love, commitment, and the sacred bond of marriage. The bride and groom exchanged vows, their voices filled with emotion, promising to love and cherish each other for all their days. John Smythe stepped forward, presenting the rings to Father Michael. The simple iron bands, forged in the heart of his fire, symbolized the strength and enduring nature of their love. He offered a silent blessing, wishing them a lifetime of happiness. Father Michael blessed the rings, invoking God's grace upon the couple. He prayed that the rings would serve as a constant reminder of their vows and the love that bound them together. He slipped the rings onto their fingers, sealing their commitment. The wedding feast was a boisterous affair. Tables groaned under the weight of roasted meats, bread, and ale. Laughter filled the air as villagers celebrated the union of the happy couple. It was a time for joy, for forgetting the hardships of their daily lives, if only for a few hours. Elizabeth sat at the edge of the celebration, watching the dancing and merriment. While she enjoyed the festivities, she couldn't shake the feeling of being an outsider. She wondered if she would ever find a love like the one celebrated today, or if she was destined to remain alone, her life defined by her work and her independence. As the night wore on, Thomas pulled Margaret onto the dance floor. It was a rare moment of carefree joy, a chance to forget the worries of the farm and the uncertainty of the future. He held her close, grateful for her presence in his life, for the love that had sustained them through good times and bad. The flickering candlelight danced around them, illuminating their faces, etched with the stories of their lives, a testament to the enduring power of love and community in their small, changing world. Winter tightened its grip on the village. The first snows had fallen weeks ago, and now a persistent, biting wind howled through the narrow lanes. Thomas knew the coming months would be a trial, a test of their resilience in stores. Food was becoming scarce. The autumn harvest, though decent, could not stretch to cover the long winter months. Margaret rationed the remaining stores with meticulous care, knowing that every scrap mattered. Thomas surveyed their dwindling supplies. The wheat was low, the salted pork almost gone. He would have to consider hunting, despite the risks and the time it would take away from other essential tasks. Margaret ensured every blanket was patched, every draft sealed. Warmth was a precious commodity, and she fought to preserve it against the relentless cold. John Smythe, despite the chill, kept his forge burning. Winter was a time for repairs, for preparing the tools that would be needed when the spring thaw arrived. Plowshares needed sharpening, hoes needed mending, and he worked diligently to ensure the village was ready. Thomas sought John's advice on reinforcing his plow. The wood was old, and he feared it would not withstand another season. They spoke in hushed tones, the unspoken anxieties of the village hanging heavy in the winter air. Elizabeth's nimble fingers were in high demand. She sewed warm cloaks and sturdy breeches, earning a meager living while providing essential protection against the cold. Sickness spread through the village like a chilling draft. Father Michael moved from house to house, offering solace and tending to the afflicted. His presence was a beacon of hope in the face of growing despair. Despite their own hardship, the villagers shared what little they had. A loaf of bread, a handful of dried beans, a warm blanket. These small acts of kindness formed a vital network of support. The church offered not only spiritual comfort but also a refuge from the biting wind. Father Michael led prayers for health, for sustenance, and for the strength to endure the winter's trials. Thomas ventured into the frozen woods, hunting for game. Each successful hunt was a small victory against starvation, a chance to replenish their dwindling stores. As the days grew shorter and the nights grew colder, Margaret held on to hope. She knew that spring would eventually return, bringing with it the promise of new life and renewed prosperity. But until then, they would endure together. The news spread quickly through the village. Old Agnes, who had lived longer than anyone could remember, had passed in her sleep. Thomas heard it from a neighbor on his way to the fields, a solemn reminder of life's fleeting nature. Margaret worried about Agnes's family. They were poor, and a death meant more mouths unfed and the burden of funeral costs. She started a pot of stew, planning to share it with the grieving family. John Smythe, the blacksmith, set aside his usual work to craft a simple wooden coffin for Agnes. It was a task he had performed many times before, a somber duty he approached with respect and care. Elizabeth Carter, with nimble fingers, stitched a linen shroud for Agnes. She worked diligently, knowing that the shroud would be the old woman's final earthly garment. Father Michael sat vigil by Agnes's body, reciting prayers for her soul's journey. He offered solace to her grieving family, reminding them of God's mercy and the promise of eternal life. The entire village gathered for Agnes's funeral. They walked in procession, carrying her simple wooden coffin to the churchyard, a testament to the community's bond. Father Michael conducted the funeral service, his words echoing in the small church. He spoke of Agnes's long life, her kindness, and her unwavering faith. He reminded them that from dust they came and to dust they shall return. One by one, the villagers approached Agnes's grave, casting handfuls of dirt onto the coffin. It was a final farewell, a moment of shared grief and remembrance. Thomas and Margaret visited Agnes's family, offering what little food they could spare. It was a small gesture, but it meant much to the grieving family. As the village mourned Agnes, life continued its relentless cycle. In another cottage, a woman went into labor, her cries echoing through the night. A few days later, Father Michael baptized a newborn child in the village church. The ceremony was filled with joy and hope, a symbol of renewal amidst the lingering grief. Thomas looked out at his fields, the winter wheat beginning to sprout. Life, like the seasons, continued its cycle of death and rebirth. The village had lost one soul but gained another, and the enduring rhythm of life went on. The grip of winter began to loosen, the earth slowly thawing under the strengthening sun. Thomas felt a familiar stirring within him, a sense of anticipation as another planting season approached. The trials of the past year, the hardships and the small joys, faded into the background, replaced by the promise of new life. Inside their small cottage, Margaret worked diligently, preparing the kitchen garden for the growing season. She carefully nurtured the seedlings, each tiny sprout a symbol of hope and sustenance for the months to come. The rhythm of the seasons dictated their lives, a constant cycle of labor and renewal. Together, Thomas and Margaret prepared for the planting. He sharpened the plow, ensuring it would cut cleanly through the earth, while she sorted the seeds, choosing the best to sow. It was a partnership built on necessity and love, a shared commitment to the land and to each other. At the forge, John Smythe worked tirelessly, repairing tools and crafting new ones for the coming season. The sound of his hammer rang out through the village, a constant reminder of the labor that sustained them all. He pondered the changing times, the new technologies slowly making their way into the world, and wondered what the future held for his craft. Elizabeth Carter, her nimble fingers flying across the fabric, sewed new shirts and repaired old garments for the villagers. Her skill was in high demand, providing her with a measure of independence and a secure place within the community. She dreamed of a future where she could build her own business and provide for herself. Father Michael walked among his flock, offering spiritual guidance and solace. He listened to their worries, their hopes, and their fears, reminding them of the enduring power of faith and community in a world filled with uncertainty. The Reformation had brought changes, but the need for spiritual connection remained constant. The first day of planting arrived, and Thomas and Margaret worked side by side in the fields. He guided the plow, turning over the soil while she followed behind, scattering the seeds with a practiced hand. The rhythmic motion was a familiar dance, a symbol of their connection to the land and to each other. From a distance, the village looked peaceful, a tapestry of fields and homes nestled in the English countryside. But beneath the surface, subtle changes were taking place, whispers of new ideas and new ways of life that would slowly transform the world they knew. John Smythe, recognizing the changing times, began to train a young apprentice, passing on his knowledge and skills to the next generation. He knew that the old ways were slowly fading, but he hoped that the craft of the blacksmith would endure. Elizabeth Carter experimented with new fabrics and designs, seeking to expand her skills and attract new customers. She was determined to make her own way in the world, to create a life of independence and purpose. As the days grew longer and the sun warmer, the first green shoots emerged from the earth, a promise of the harvest to come. Thomas and Margaret stood together in their field, watching the miracle of life unfold before their eyes. The cycle had begun anew, and with it, a renewed sense of hope and optimism. The flickering candle continued to burn, a testament to the enduring strength of the human spirit. In the small English village, life went on, a constant struggle against the odds, but also a celebration of community, faith, and the simple joys of existence. The ordinary people of the 16th century faced their challenges with courage and resilience, leaving behind a legacy of perseverance that would echo through the ages.